Let me go. Abigail flung her father's hand aside angrily. You might be a coward, but I will never bow down to them like you do. She could leave now, but what about Natasha and the others? Was she supposed to abandon her friends and run away? She could never do that. Abigail, as long as you're alive, there's always a chance for you to seek revenge, Mr. Robinson advised. You can leave if you want to, but don't tell me what to do. Abigail snapped coolly. She despised her spineless father. He bowed down to others no matter what. He had never once acted like a man. Others had made fun of her all her life because of his timid actions. Therefore, she'd sworn that no matter what, she would never lose her dignity. Stop being so stubborn, Abigail. Let's go. Mr. Robinson tugged at Abigail anxiously. I told you not to tell me what to do. Scram. Abigail shoved her father, and the man fell to the ground. Marlon grinned at the sight. You should have listened to your father, darling. You wouldn't have been able to escape, but it would have been fun to watch you two try. He never planned to let them escape in the first place. He was merely playing a game of cat and mouse. I knew you were up to no good. Abigail clutched her dagger and tried to stab Marlon. As long as she could defeat that man, they would all be safe. What a fool. Marlon shook his head. Then, he planted his foot into Abigail's chest. Abigail grunted as the force through her backward blood trickled out of the corner of her mouth. For a moment, she was immobile. Since you like using force so much, why don't we start with you? Marlon slowly approached her with a leering grin. He wanted to take her clothes off. Mr. Robinson was instantly alarmed. Falling onto his knees before Marlon, he begged, Please forgive her, sir. She's just a child. I beg you. He bowed deeply. Fuck off, you old shit. Annoyed, Marlon kicked Mr. Robinson aside. Sir. Mr. Robinson clambered back to his knees. Please let my daughter go. I'll do anything you want. Are you fucking deaf? I told you to piss off. Marlon kicked Mr. Robinson again, harder this time. The older man grunted as he flew backward. Still, he staggered to his feet and lunged toward Marlon. He held the other man's calf, begging, Please, sir, please don't hurt my daughter. You're dead meat. Finally losing his temper, Marlon planted a furious kick on Mr. Robinson's back. Mr. Robinson threw up blood that dyed the snow red. However, he refused to let go of Marlon's leg. Just die already, you old coot. His stubbornness ticked Marlon off, who planted kick after kick on his back. Each kick caused Mr. Robinson to throw up blood. Still, his grip never loosened. Fuck off. Furious, Marlon aimed his last blow at Mr. Robinson's head. He kicked it like a football. Immediately, Mr. Robinson went flying and crashed into a tree. He was bleeding profusely. Dad, Abigail, Natasha, and the others were devastated. They knew that the force Marlon used was enough to kill his opponent. Even the strongest martial artist would have died on the spot from that attack. There was no way Mr. Robinson was fine. That piece of shit dirted my clothes. Marlon tried to dust the blood off his pants legs, disgusted. I'll kill you. Abigail howled. She grabbed her dagger and charged toward Marlon. Marlon sneered and grabbed her wrist, effectively pressing her onto the ground. No one's going to interrupt us now, honey. Let's do it here. Grinning perversely, he tore off her jacket, exposing her voluptuous figure. Fuck off. Abigail slammed her knee into Marlon's groin with all her might, her eyes bloodshot. Arg. Marlon wailed. His face was twisting in pain. You bitch. How dare you harm me? I'm going to kill you. He pulled out his sword and swung it toward her. The blade was going to slice through her, but a bloody hand appeared from nowhere and grabbed the tip of the blade. Heh! Marlon lifted his head. The person who stopped his attack was Mr. Robinson. However, he seemed like a completely different person. This Mr. Robinson was no longer timid and fearful, instead, he was cold and ruthless. How are you still alive? Marlon's expression sobered. Why did you have to push me? Mr. Robinson sighed. Couldn't you have just let this matter slide? What the hell are you talking about, old man? Marlon frowned uneasily. He realized that the air around the older man was slowly shifting. I've already given you a chance, but you didn't appreciate it, so don't blame me. Mr. Robinson tightened his grip slightly, and Marlon's sword instantly shattered into a million pieces. At the same time, a burst of energy exploded out of him. It rippled through the wind and caused snow to whirl up. Even the plants around them began to sway and shake as if they were marveling at his strength. Mr. Robinson inhaled deeply, and all the joints in his body cracked. He gradually absorbed all the natural essence surrounding him into his body. Soon, he became so powerful that it was hard for others to even look him in the eye. Who are you? Marlon scrambled backward in terror. He never expected the timid old man to undergo such a drastic change. Now, Mr. Robinson was like a ferocious dragon who had just woken up from his deep slumber. A mere peek at the man was enough to send shivers down one's spine. Marlon had met countless masters in his lifetime, but Mr. Robinson was the scariest person he had ever seen. In fact, Mr. Robinson might even be considered a god at this point, being who stood higher than any human. You shouldn't have hurt my daughter. Mr. Robinson shook his head. He pointed in Marlon's direction, and without warning, the man's body exploded like a balloon. Marlon died in an instant. Effortlessly. However, a finger was all Mr. Robinson needed to kill him. How terrifying. Was this really the cowardly old man they all knew? Run. Once they got over the shock, the group of large men spun around and began to flee. They had no idea what had happened, but they knew Mr. Robinson was far stronger than expected. Marlon had been killed easily, so there was no way they'd stand a chance against that man. You shouldn't have done all that if you were afraid of dying. Mr. Robinson waved his hand casually, and the men immediately burst apart. They turned into a bloody mist. Everyone was shocked by the sight, especially Abigail. Her eyes were wide open. She couldn't believe that her cowardly father had suddenly turned so strong. Wow, he really kept his skills well hidden. Dustin, who had just arrived, gaped at Mr. Robinson. He always thought he had a good eye. However, he never realized such a strong individual had been hiding under his nose this entire time. Mr. Robinson? Is that really you? Natasha asked hesitantly, astonished. I apologize for scaring you, Ms. Natasha. Mr. Robinson lowered his head. He quickly returned to how he was earlier. However, no one could look down on him anymore. Dad, how? Abigail was at a loss for words. She couldn't understand why her father would hide his powers and let others walk all over him. I'm sorry for deceiving you all these years. I wanted you to grow up as an ordinary person, but I didn't expect things to turn out like this. Mr. Robinson sighed. He knew how dangerous the martial world was, so he hoped his daughter could stay out of it. Alas, things didn't always go as planned. Who are you? Why are you so strong? And why did you lie to me? Abigail fired questions rapidly. Her head was completely blank at the moment. It's a long story. Mr. Robinson began. Suddenly, a group of people emerged from the snow ahead. It was the rest of the Harmon family. The Harmon family's strongest fighters, which consisted of hundreds of Harmon family elite guards and aides, were being led by Hector. Natasha, Ruth, are you girls all right? Hector asked as he and his group braved the blizzard and trudged toward them. He stared at the bright red snow fearfully. We're fine. We ran into some bastards earlier, but fortunately, Mr. Robinson was around. Natasha forced a smile. Mr. Robinson? Hector was taken aback. He surveyed the mess in dismay. After all, the pieces of flesh littering the ground could only have been caused by using powerful true energy to blast the bodies apart.